When you think of Pacific Island nations, you think of beauty, pristine beaches, relaxation. That's the sound of icebergs and our world cracking. The lives of the people of the Pacific Islands are being destroyed by climate change. Not tomorrow, but today. Hi, I'm Eli Berliner and welcome to this podcast. Today I'm interviewing Fijian activist Savendra Michael on the lived realities of climate change in the Pacific and how only together we can change course.
My name is Savendra Michael. I am from the Ba province of Fiji. Ba province is the biggest province of Fiji and is one of the provinces that is most frequented by floods and tropical cyclones. Climate change is a lived reality for many of the Pacific Island countries, and the situation is getting worse.
Can you describe how it's getting worse?
Growing up in this community, we have seen how floods occur at an unprecedented rate. It is almost normal to have 3 to 4 floods in a year. It is almost normal for us to get hit by a category 4, category 5 cyclone. Having lived through that reality, I did not realize how people's livelihoods being compromised, how people struggle, how we have no food on the table, how we cannot commute to school is not normal. Waking up to a day and hearing a flood siren go on and picking up all your livelihood is not normal. I know many friends that have lost loved ones through tropical cyclone and through floods. And this is through unforeseen circumstances where the houses collapse and the person is inside, or when the person tries to cross a flooded river for their safety. There's many other factors that people of these countries know and talk about, but is never shared in global media.
Since you did research in these Fijian communities, can you tell us what it's like to live through this?
A personal story related to this is in Ba province. There were floods, and sitting on the roof with little kids and seeing how people mobilize themselves to save their livelihoods and save their lives of the elderly, lives of persons with disability, lives of kids. It was just haunting because you see that people are faced with this situation on a regular basis and they are still able to put a smile on their face and are still a bit able to resist, and they are still able to live in evacuation centers for long periods of time and say that we are stronger than this.
I mean, what happens to these communities? Do they have to evacuate their homes?
There are about 47 communities that have been identified to be relocated to higher grounds because every monsoon season there are high tides, there's heavy rainfall, and water levels increase up to the roof level. For Kiribati, there's the issue of king tides. Kiribati is a small atoll country located a few kilometers southwest of Fiji. When there is a king tide, seawater actually goes into the mainland. If you want to picture this in your head, it's like small waves of tsunami coming into your land and hitting over the seawall and hitting into the country. That means it comes into the houses, washes away things, and then goes back. And this happens every king tide. And what seawater does is it destroys the quality of the soil, and basically that's food on the table. And for them, that is washed off with one king tide.
Yeah, that's a good point. I read that Kiribati bought land in Fiji because they're afraid of losing their country to climate change.
What worries me is that there is many other parts of the Pacific, like Tuvalu, which have been predicted to be completely underwater by 2050. We are already experiencing climate change at a rate that is beyond our control.
Could you talk about your work to combat climate change and more specifically about your programs valuing voices and active citizens?
We use programs like Valuing Voices and Active Citizens to build trust and understanding amongst young people so that we are able to share these narratives through different platforms. For example, in Valuing Voices, it is about using digital forms of storytelling to amplify the voices of those that are affected by issues that concern them, such as climate change. And for active citizens, it's about building trust and understanding to getting people to actually implement projects on the ground. It's basically social action projects that empower change. It's collective people power that will break down all the pillars of capitalism, that support white supremacy, that support fossil fuel industry.
What role would you say that the media plays in your campaign?
The role of media is very critical because media provides the platform for us to amplify the stories of people. We are now moving towards social media. Digital transformation has taken place at such a rapid rate that people are able to access everything on their fingertips. They're able to engage, they're able to advocate, they're able to express themselves. One of the examples was the global climate strike that happened all across the world. Even in the US, even in New York, people took the streets. But it was all organized through social media.
There are many people that don't believe in climate change. How do we address them, and should we try to convince them that climate change is real?
I'm just going to be very frank here. I don't think it is the job of us to convince climate deniers that climate change is actually happening. There will always be this left hand group that continues to question. The moment we invest our energy into convincing people like that, we are just going to open a whole other debate, which is not going to make productive use of our time, right? Mainstream media really fails to sometimes account for the voices that are actually affected because of the way in which they narrate the story. They often use vocabulary in a way or words that actually dismisses the narrative of us, which actually fuels the ideologies and mindsets of climate deniers. And I think that the onset of more journalists being open to more perspectives about climate change will be only created through the engagement of stories by people in first-hand narration.
Do you think that the individual choices that a person makes have an impact?
The impact can be 0.0000001%, but together it's going to generate into a larger impact. Being locally engaged means we are globally connected, and being globally connected means we can have a global impact. Currently in Fiji, if we say something against our government, the price that we have to pay is so much more than someone in the US and Australia that can actually say whatever they want against the government in whatever capacity on social media. People always say that it is a policy, but it did not consult us. Well, you can change that policy.
Do you ever doubt what you're doing and feel hopeless in the face of climate change?
I wouldn't say doubt. I worry that I'm not doing enough. The fact that I am a father to a 7-year-old daughter who needs me to fight for her future at this stage because she's too young to actually take the streets. But still, what is inspiring is that every time I take on a strike, I see her also joining me or wanting to be out there. And so doing it for her generation really inspires me. Your ways of doing things inspire others.
What can a New York City high school student do to combat climate change?
Leverage off your local power. See how national policy on climate change is being discussed. Join groups that exist in the US. My entry point is a lived reality. My way of activism work is very different. My toolbox is completely different from the toolbox that somebody else would have. Your entry point is very different. You are learning about climate change through my story. To all of you in New York and other parts of the world that are going to listen to this podcast, I encourage you to stand out of your comfort zone, educate yourself, learn about issues of climate change, learn about issues that concern you as an individual, and engage in a way that is meaningful. Because you, as an individual, have the power to create change.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to me. And Loloma, which means big love from Fiji. And on behalf of young Pacific Islanders in the Pacific, we encourage you to join us in this fight together.